welcome back. We're back with another deck tech video. It is June of 2025. The Final Fantasy set is just about to come around the corner here, and we're in Pride Month. So I thought I would spend some of my downtime this month catching up on some deck tech videos. I am a Grixis, a Mono Red, and a Rakdos fan at heart, so all of my decks I've been showing this month have been the color combinations of all of those. We have my Grixis deck here, and we have a rare commander, Ashnod the Uncaring. This is a pretty unique one. She came out in the Mishra pre-con, and she was pretty much overshadowed by a better commander. Mishra is a fantastic commander. Ashnod is very powerful, but a very niche and unique commander. She's also very old from the storyline. I have a fanaticism for those old books. If you are a fan of my channel, you know about a decade ago, I showed all of my Vanguard cards and the original Ashnod rendition. Those original books from that cycle were fantastic stories. Highly recommend a good read if you would like to know the lore. We'll not go into the lore in this video. But to be completely honest, while I have this deck tech going, this deck is not long for the world. I have squeezed all of the fun and entertainment out of this deck. I have learned all of the intricacies, the intricate parts and interactions that I can. And I think it's time I'm going to move on. So before I move on, and I've already got my next commander over here, I'll show at the end of the video, I'm going to show the current deck list for what I'm running. Because this is a rare commander. What she offers, the format is very unique. And there's a lot of very unique synergistic cards that a lot of people don't know work well with her. So let's run through what she does real quick. We have a 5-mana 1/4 for a Human Artificer with Death Touch. She is a fantastic blocker. She is a copy effect. She is basically a synergistic utility piece. She's not going to win you the game, but she can give you synergistic value based on what cards you put in your deck, and that's the fun part here. Now, it is something that is oftentimes confusing. Most people think that she is some kind of artifact sacrifice matters deck. Specifically what she does here, if you activate an ability of a creature or artifact that requires sacrificing a permanent, then you copy the effect. So it does not have to be a sacrificed artifact to get the double effect. If you have a creature like a Doomed Necromancer, you're sacrificing a creature to a creature, and you're getting a trigger that can work with here. So there are effects that a lot of people skip over. Most people think of Ashnod as being an artifact sacrifice commander, but you can do creature sacrifice synergies. There are things that allow you to sacrifice non-creature, non-artifacts, like your lands, for benefit, and we'll get to that in the deck. Per power level, we should address that sooner than later, because that is a hard topic for this deck. This is a combo deck. It has 2.5 lines of an infinite combo loop. Not quite infinite, but just winning via a combo. And because of that, this deck is in brackets 3.5. It's not quite bracket 4, but it's a little bit too good for bracket 3. There's a gray area here. There are a few game changers in this deck, but relying on this commander is a hindrance for a competitive bracket 4 combo deck. She is very good at creating synergy. She is a slow synergistic piece, but she requires other parts. She costs 5 mana. Is not quite up to speed for a true bracket 4 deck, but the deck can take infinite turns. It's a gray area, and that will be for you, the player, to decide how you determine your brackets. If you want to cut some of the game changers, or if you want to try to push it harder, change the commander but keep the strategy, that's up to you. Let's go through the deck, and I will try to show you what I believe is the best Ashnod build I've been able to come up with. Let's take her off here, and if there are synergistic cards, I will try to reiterate how they work with here. Most of the deck works with her. Let's start with the creature package. Now, while you don't have to have artifact sacrifice synergies, there are good ones with this deck. So we have a lot of artifact support. This is still a Grixis artifact deck, but there's a splash of creature sacrifice effects. Emery is a fantastic inclusion for any sort of artifact strategy. She comes in cheaper usually. She mills something over, and she allows us to rebuy something from our graveyard every turn she's allowed to survive. This literally could be rebuying a Wayfarer's Bauble for value, which sounds weirdly slow, but if you consider that a Wayfarer's Bauble and our commander double ramps, That's actually very good. Emery is a fantastic card, a fantastic commander, oftentimes considered a stormy bauble sort of control commander, but in this deck she is excellent. Next we have Scrap Trawler, a recursion package. A lot of our stuff in our deck is built around sacrifice. A lot of it is artifacts. So the Scrap Trawler, Scrappy T, will always pick up some good stuff for us. Then we have a package of tutors. Unfortunately, this deck has a bunch of tutors. We really do need to see the best cards available early game because we can't really get her out early. We want to set up for a turn after she's in play. So we have all of the mages except for the brand new one. There is something called Transit Mage, which gets a 4 or a 5-drop artifact, and that's not in here. I have one in my Kaiga deck, but it's just, I didn't need it in this deck. But we have one to get 6 drops, 1 drops like a Sensei's Top. We have one to get 2 drops like a Time Sieve. Hint, hint. Then we have one to get 3 drops, like this could be anything from a Commander Sphere or something like that. But these 4 are basic tutor creatures. They are designed to come out early, so you have a chump blocker, but they can go get you some value piece to help you set up your turns. Going on, we have Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum. It's so silly seeing these cards in almost every deck I've made this past month. These are the land ramp cards, especially in a non-green deck. They are good with our commander, specifically Canoptic Wraith and Burnished Heart double trigger, which means that you're paying a total of 6 mana to get 4 lands into play tapped. That actually makes this barely playable card very good. Like holding up, if you get 5 mana for Ashnod, you actually want to hold Burnished Heart in your hand to get 6 mana so you can instantly crack it. Because jumping from 6 mana to 10 mana is a significant jump. Canoptic Wraith is essentially a pseudo-worse Burnished Heart. It requires a combat. You have to get in. This is good if you run the Sword of Animist sort of effects, because this creature cannot be blocked, so sometimes you don't want to sacrifice the Canoptic Wraith if you just want to get some more attacks off with a Sword of Value. And then we have this really weird-looking Secret Lair Solemn Simulacrum. I'm on the fence if I like this art or not. I know there's a set that came with Tezzeret and the clone, the Metamorph clone, whatever the frick the Metamorph is. These are interesting. I kind of do like the estrangeness to the artwork, but I haven't really locked in if I do or don't like this. No. Going on down, we have Jalira, the Master Polymorphist. This is a fantastic inclusion, especially regarding Ashnod. Now, Jalira cannot polymorph into a legendary creature, but what this is a 4-mana 2/2 body that every turn she's allowed to survive and tap. You can sack a creature to get another creature out of your deck. Cannot be legendary. If you are familiar with my channel many years ago, I had a 1v1 Vendilion Click deck, which was all about polymorphing Ulamog into play. For a while, I was trying out Jalira instead of Vendilion Click. The problem is she can't get legendary stuff, so we were making our deck significantly worse by trying to stick that in the command zone. But with our commander here, we are sacrificing a creature to an effect. This will double trigger, giving us 2 creatures every time we activate Jalira. Let's go on down to some more toys. We have another sort of sacrifice effect, Goblin Engineer. We get to sack an artifact to return an artifact. We have a number of little bauble effects, Wayfarer bauble sort of things, a Vexing bauble. So we have some cheap stuff we can toss in the graveyard, a little bit of if we know opponents are going to be casting free spells or graveyard stuff, we can try to set up to have some sort of protection and put it back into play. And again, with our commander, we can get some double value off of this sacrifice. Going on down, we have potentially one of the best cards in the deck. That's really weird to say. So, Dreamscape Artist is Harrow, the green spell that's 3 mana, instant sack a land, tutor for 2 lands. Is Harrow on a creature where you discard a card, sack a land, get 2 lands untapped from your deck. If our commander is in play, we get 4 untapped lands from our deck. Every turn this is allowed to survive. Yeah, you're discarding a card and you're sacking 1 of those every turn, but getting 4 untapped lands in play in a Grixis deck, that is unheard of. That is the kind of... This is one of the best interactions you can actually hope to get with your commander. You really want to protect this if you can. Don't toss this out early if you don't have your commander anytime soon. This is just going to die, and you really don't want this to die. Going on, we have Doth the Voidwalker as a generically good card. this card does have a sacrifice effect on a creature. We can use our commander to double the ability, so it actually fits the deck. Typically, you just see Dauthi as a generic hate piece. Maybe you're holding equipment because the shadow body can get through, but it actually makes sense in this deck. It is perfectly tuned for what the deck wants to do. We have a Miser card in Fulminator Mage because we can sack it to destroy a non-basic land. Land destruction is typically not very much appreciated in any queue, but having this synergistic with our commander, meaning we can sack this to destroy 2 lands, is a fantastic play. This is the sort of card we want to play early, well before her commander, because this will either make people want to make a conversation, a dialogue with us to not blow up their lands, or it will get the removal out of their hands earlier, so Ashnod may not be a target for that removal by the time it gets out. But fantastic inclusion. Now we have another way of sacrificing for value. This, with our commander, can double tutor things into play. We don't have anything like terrifyingly big in this deck. There's a few big win conditions this can snap into play for us. But if our commander's in play, getting 2 permanents from our deck into play is a very good value. And the last 2 cards in the deck are related to a combo. We'll talk about the combos near the end of the deck. If you know about my 2011 Vela the Nightclad deck, you can probably know why this is here. But this is an additional copy of this with some finagling. And when we get to the combo, I will explain how these 2 work. Basically, they come into play. You can interact with his enter the battlefield thing on the stack to give him more counters. That's the ploy with this guy, to get more tokens out of him. But I'll explain that more later in the video. Let's go on to the instances and sorcery spells. There's a nice chunk. I won a pair of these at my local LGS. It is a very good card. This is probably a new era of what counter spells and utility spells are going to be looking like. I haven't really decided if I like this. This doesn't fit my retro old person themes of cards that I tend to run. But I do like this card. This is giving us a lot of utility, and being able to make a token copy of something is always valuable. Going on, we have one game changer in this deck is a Cyclonic Rift. I have fallen out of favor of this card over the years. This has always been in most of my previous pre-2020 deck techs. But this is a win more card in most situations. The problem is the caliber of your opponents, because if you're playing in a 4 or 5 bracket pod, Cyclonic Rift is only good. It's not amazing. But as soon as you drop down to a bracket 3 or 2 pod, then this becomes a degenerately oppressive card. So it is awkward in this deck, because this deck is somewhere between 3 and 4. We do want to retain this one piece of paper in my collection, although. So out of all of my decks that are currently running blue, I've stuck it in this deck just to make sure I keep the card, although I'm honestly not a fan of the card. Commit to Memory is one way we have to reshuffle our graveyard back into our deck. We do have a few key pieces if we want to try to go for our combo. What this is a interactive spell on the stack to put something back to the opponent's hand or top their deck. But this part is in our graveyard. We can use this to shuffle our hand and graveyard in and draw 7. So if we lost something that we cannot recur, a vital part of our combo, this is our reshuffle. We have red in our Grixis deck, and we have to have excuses to play red. Otherwise, we're just playing Dimir. And Vandal Blast is one of the best reasons to run red. This is a way of blowing up artifacts. There is a Myconosynth Lattice in the deck. If you're unfamiliar with that card, I will put this off to the side and explain that shortly, but there is a reason we're playing Vandal Blast. We do have 2 little bits of target removal. Again, these are cards that have retained from my old collection, because I used to do the player reward system. These are textless cards. Destroys a non-black creature. Destroys a creature, can't be regenerated. These are literally cards from my history. These are probably not as good as what current cards are capable of, but we are playing with my old ghetto cards, so easily replaceable options. But we have a new one. This replaced Blasphemous Act. I'm just playing with this because it is a sacrifice effect. It is thematic with the deck. I can't benefit from the sacrifice effect, but it seemed to be a more appropriate board wipe for what this deck is trying to do. But you could just plug in Blasphemous Act for the same effect here. We have a Toxic Deluge and a fun Seb McKinnon Damnation. I love Seb McKinnon artwork. If you've watched my most recent few videos, you've noticed every single deck video I put up has had at least one Seb McKinnon piece of artwork in the deck. His stuff is fantastic. But we have a Damnation just for another board wipe, and a utility card. This is another tutor, but this one is restricted to CMC of 2. So this could go get a time sieve, or this could be instant speed graveyard hate. If someone else is doing something, dredging something, some kind of Life of the Loam nonsense that we don't want to interact with, or reanimation strategies we can't stop, we have an instant speed graveyard hate spell. This is another pet card. It has probably not withstood the age. It's probably easily replaceable with better cards, but this is something I've been holding on to because it is a part of my past. So, tutor for 2, sorcery. You can only do the transmute as a sorcery. Usually this would go get a time sieve or like a mind stone or something like that. Going on down, we have a few more tutors. Whir of Invention goes and gets any artifact from our deck and puts it straight into play. Improvising is helpful when we have a few creature artifacts that can help tap it down. But this is going to go get one of the combo enabling pieces. We will hold on to this until the last possible moment. Going on down, we have more tutors and Beseech the Mirror. We do have a plethora of things we can bargain. Bargain requires a sacrifice of an artifact. Now that does not work with our commander. There's no cheeky sacrifice antics that work there, and we don't have any tokens other than the Thopters. But this is basically a 4-mana tutor. If we want to sacrifice a bauble or a mana rock or something, we can put something into play for free. We also have Dark Petition. We have a good chunk of spells here. Sometimes we'll have Spell Mastery. To be realistic, these 2 cards, if you wanted to improve this deck to be more of a 4 caliber, a bracket 4 caliber, this should be Demonic, this should be Vampiric Tutor. But we're running these 2. Going on down, we have a Reshape. We cannot afford the most ridiculously expensive cards like Transmute Artifact. Those would be in a deck like this. Again, if you want to increase the power level of the deck, Transmute Artifact would be the way to go. But we have Reshape. It is a budget version of that, where we can sacrifice an artifact, add some extra mana into the value to Whir of Invention, essentially something from our deck into play. We have some more draw effects. Factor Fiction has been in every single blue deck I've been recording in the past few weeks. It's just always been good. It has withstood the test of time. It will always give us the best options we need. Our deck can recur things from the graveyard, so we don't care if things get discarded that we needed. Windfall, same thing. It is a card that has consistently always been a playable card. Usually a draw 7, if not more, sometimes less, but it's always a good refill. Aminatu's Augury, once again, a card that has shown up in every single blue splash deck I've been playing in the past, or showing in the past few months here. This is just a fantastic value piece. 8 mana is very steep. We don't actually have any enchantments, I believe, that we can cast. We have an enchantment land, but I don't think there's any enchantments this can hit. But this is such a good card because we have some expensive artifacts, and artifact creatures and artifact non-creatures. So we can use this to cheat typically 2 or 3 permanents into play. And getting the extra land in a Grixis deck, obviously very helpful. Finally, we have another game changer in Jeska's Will. Again, it's hard to rationalize why red's in this deck. The color identity of Ashnod is Grixis, but there's not a lot of red things going on here. But this is one of the better cards we can use. We don't really want to exile a lot of stuff off our deck, but we're more here for the ritual. This could be a mana geyser if you don't want to play a game changer, but I think Jeska's Will is good enough to be just a ritual to help us boost into our late game. Realistically, Ashnod's not always going to be around, so treat this as just a ritual. Let's go on to the biggest chunk of the deck, the artifacts. Starting off with the mana rocks. Let's try to break these down into sections. Mana rocks, and then we'll get to the sacrifice matters. So I've been sitting on this old Mox Opal for a while. This is a pack opened Mox Opal from a friend back in West by God, Virginia. You know who you are. I still have your Mox Opal. That's one of the fun things. When I quit back in 2020, I purged almost everything I had. I went to one functional EDH deck, a binder full of basic lands, and a small selection of cards that had sentimental value, cards that were traded to me, cards from my childhood. This was something traded to me by someone that was very close. They opened this, and I've been sitting on this for 12 years. Like, I know that they tried to force this into a Shroom EDH deck when the 2013 precons came out. because they had the From the Vault Shroom. Oh gosh, we're going back. Anyways, old card is old. This is not necessary for the deck. This is here because I had this card. You don't really need it. You can use any other artifact mana rock. We have a Soul Ring because it's EDH. What'd you expect? We have a Thelwar Stone, Arcane Signet. These are just the colorful rocks. But now we have a few that actually interact with our commander. These all have the ability to be sacrificed for value. If our commander is in play, we would get 2 lands off of Wayfarer's Bauble. That's making a very good card even better, especially if you can recur this from the graveyard with the little goblin and do this multiple times. Mind Stone, we can sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. There's a number of baubles coming up here. Bauble being a generic artifact that you can sacrifice for a card. Mirren Safehouse is typically used as a fetch land, but this itself is an artifact. So if anyone had cracked a fetch land earlier in the game, this is typically seen as a rampant growth. But with our commander, this doubles the ability. And if you have a Mirren's, like a Myriad Landscape in the graveyard, where you normally get 2 lands off of this, with our commander, that makes 4 lands. Again, fantastic and very small utility, but always good. Finally, we have a Commander's Sphere. One of the more interesting cards that recently got cut out of this deck was called Esoteric Duplicator. It was a blue 3-mana clue artifact that had some sacrifice shenanigans attached to it. That card looked like a combo piece, but it took so many parts to make it work as a combo that it essentially became a very expensive draw 1 or 2 extra cards per turn effect. The exception was when you combine it with Commander Sphere, because if you have the Duplicator out and Commander Sphere together, you can make copies of Commander Sphere and sacking them for mana to draw and draw. That was the only situation I found where the Esoteric Duplicator was actually good enough to be in this deck. If you wanted to remove the combos out of this deck and just have a grindy value engine side of deck, that would probably be the best route to take, is getting cards like that. But with Commander Sphere, with our commander, we can tap this floating a mana. We can sacrifice it to draw 1 card plus an additional card. Let's go on to the rest of the baubles. We have a Vexing Bauble. There's just a few value baubles in here that are here exclusively for our commander. They are fantastic because they just draw us extra cards. So some of these are here just to kind of cantrip. These can stop people from playing free spells, messing around with their graveyard, a little bit of graveyard hate attached to them. Some of them, like Relic Virginis, may end up being in your deck. It just depends on what you're playing against and what you want in your own graveyard. Executioner's Capsule is funny. You can kill 2 creatures. Unfortunately, black creatures are very common in EDH, so sometimes this can't target anything real. Mnemonic Sphere and an essential duplicate is an essential duplicate of the Courier's Capsule. Both of these are artifacts that come into play. You can cast them. This one you can actually just channel if you want 1 card. But with our commander, these 2 cards allow us to draw 4 cards for an essential 4 mana. 4 mana, 4 cards is actually a very good deal. Going on down, we have Helm of Possession. This is another unique one that I don't think showed up in a lot of deck tech videos in EDH Rec when I was doing the research for this deck. Helm of Possession requires you to sacrifice a creature, which means it triggers our commander. So we can actually steal 2 creatures with Helm of Possession instead of just 1, which is fantastic. Mindslaver is another Miser card. There are no infinite Mindslaver loops in this deck. This is here for generic value. And that is a very weird thing to say about Mindslaver. But if you think about it, this fits our commander's flavor because it gives us a sacrificed artifact. We can take 2 different opponents' turns. You can't stack the same opponent 2 turns. That doesn't work. But you can take 2 different opponents' turns and have them pit against each other or whatever you need to do. Honestly, because this costs so much mana, this deck has other things to do with that mana. Sometimes this might need to come out. I think more than half the time, this has been used when Ashnod's even in play just to, like, fog a turn. Like, go after the aggro player who's, like, trying to gun me down and just make them not attack me for a turn. But Mindslaver is a miser. Like, it tends to make people very unhappy. But in this deck, it makes perfect sense. It is literally synergistic with what our commander is doing, and we're not using this as a combo piece. we could. Expedition Map is perfect for our deck. We can use this to go get any 2 lands. There are a few specific non-basics that this is good at getting, specifically Urza's Cave, Myriad Landscape, and there is an Urza's Saga in this deck. And there's a reason I'm talking about non-artifact lands. We'll get to that in a second. But this is a good generic value on its own. But with our commander, we get 2 for 1. Same thing, Moonsilver Key. This can be used to go get a Soul Ring. This can be used to go get any land, whatever you like, a basic or something. This is just a value piece. It replaces itself. It's kind of like a bauble. But with our commander in play, this can really help you push a little bit further ahead than you normally would. Boy, this is a bad card. Navigation Orb is basically 5 mana for Cultivate, where Kadam is Reach. Get a land in play into your hand and into play tapped. But with our commander, it doubles it, so you're getting 4. This is not nearly as good as the Dreamscape Artist or Burnished Heart. But the potential is still there. We still want the duplicate parts. Like, more Burnished Hearts is still better than none. And this is at least partially there. So, this may, if you're definitely pushing for a bracket 4, this would be an auto cut. It's not fast enough. It's not getting enough lands into play. But this is a nice pre-Ashnod effect to get you to the mana to cast Ashnod. Going on down, we have the first of the combo pieces. There's a Time Sieve. It is a combo deck. This is a combo piece that is talking about sacrificing artifacts. Our commander cares about sacrificing artifacts. Thematically, this fits, because even if we cannot go infinite with this, by activating it 1 time with our commander in play, we get 2 turns. So that's kind of why I even chose to put it in the deck. A lot of people, it's just really hard to gauge if this is a 3 or 4 bracket deck, because it can take infinite turns, but the speed, the efficiency is the problem. There's no real way to consistently build up this combo very quickly. And I'll talk about how that combo works shortly here, so we'll get there in a second. The last artifact that can sacrifice things for our commander is Bolas the Citadel. I'm joking, obviously. Yeah, you can use this last ability down here, sacrificing things to make people lose 10 twice. This is another part of another combo. This is a game changer, and we're going to talk about that one next, because those cards are right next to me. These cards are, we'll push Ashnod out of the way because she's not relevant for this interaction, but we have Bolas the Citadel, generically on its own, very powerful, helps you dig very deeply into your deck. If you combine that with Sensei's Divining Top, that means every 1 life you pay into this, because you can keep playing this off of this, you can flop top on top of your deck. So every 1 life you're drawing deeper in your deck. If you have free spells or spells you want to cast off the top of your deck, you're skipping that or paying a little bit more life. More importantly, if you have an Aetherworks Reservoir, you're gaining life every time you cast. And you start building more life than you're paying, and eventually you have more than enough life to kill everybody with Aetherflux. So not exactly an infinite combo, but this does require some finagling, some finesse, and some tutors to make work correctly. There's a bunch of tutors in the deck. We can usually assemble parts of this. We have a Trinket Mage, and in Urza Saga just for this, we have the Treasure Mage to get the 6-drop. I don't have the Transit Mage. Transit Mage could be here to get this. But yeah, this is the first combo, but it's not an infinite combo. And to be honest, like, if you've played with Bolas Citadel, you know you're likely to kill yourself by accident sometimes if you just don't see the combo and you're going for it. Going on down, we do have a Rings of Brighthearth. There's a few more artifacts here we'll talk about. Rings of Brighthearth doubles the activated ability. So if we had a Planeswalker, which we're getting to, or we had a sacrifice effect, we can pay 2 and double that effect. You know what's amazing is when you're going and getting 4 lands with that Dreamscape Artist or Burnished Heart, what if you just paid 2 mana and you got 6 lands? That's fantastic. We have a pile of fetch lands in this deck. And this combos with every fetch land. Every fetch land becomes, because it costs 2 mana, a rampant growth. You get an extra land into play. Fantastic card, should be an auto include in this type of deck. Going on down, we have a Palantir of Ornthak. This is one of my favorite cards I've been squeezing into most of my decks. It is a slow cantrip, not cantrip, a draw effect. Basically a weird version of I wouldn't even say it's a Phyrexian arena. You can't get more than one card a turn. But we do have some recursion in this deck. We don't mind having some things milled over. It does give the opponents a choice, but what usually happens, the first 2 or 3 turns this is in play, the opponent will just take the damage. You might flip a land or a mana rock or something cheap, and they'll just take a few points of chip damage. But after the 3rd or 4th turn, if they accidentally take 10 or more damage off of this, which is very likely, that's when you just start drawing extra cards. The Scry also really does help this deck. Going on down, we have a Crucible World. This goes with this gigantic complement of fetch lands. When you start seeing things like Rings of Bright Hearth, Crucible Worlds, fetch lands put together, that's a very good recursion-like setup, and you can always use that to get really deep into the late game. And finally, another problematic card of why we have Vandal Blast in the deck is a Myconith Lattice. We'll also talk about the Planeswalker in the deck while we're here too. So again, it's a combo deck. We have a few combos. Myconith Lattice turns everything into an artifact, including your opponent's lands. Karn, we don't care about his plus or minus. We care about this ability right here. What he does is he says your artifacts of your opponents cannot be activated. So if they had an artifact land, they cannot use that for mana. So if these two are in play, that means your opponents cannot use their anything to cast spells. They can still attack you. They can still attack Karn. So you do have to be a little bit careful. The alternative here is if everything your opponents controls is an artifact and you blow up all the artifacts you don't control, that means you're blowing up all of your opponent's lands. This is a very old combo interaction. Karn's new. To me, he's still considered new, although I think this came out now 5-6 years ago. But this is the OG mono red wombo combo. This guy was originally printed in dark steel. This is a game-ending interaction. It does not actually kill the opponents, but it makes them concede. Let's go on down. While I have the Lattice here, there is a reason I chose to put Lattice in the deck. It was not specifically to combo. It was because our commander, if she's in play and we have a Lattice in play and we have a fetch land, that means the fetch land is an artifact. And with our commander, every fetch land we have will get us 2 lands. That is the actual reason Lattice is in play. So if you're not wanting to combo, you can take out the Karn, you can take out the artifact destruction spells. It's very dangerous to run this card on its own. You have to have some way of protecting itself or yourself, because your opponents might destroy all of the artifacts for you. But with these two put together, every fetch land you play turns into a double ramp spell, sometimes more. But let's go through that real quick while we're here. These are all of the non-basics in the deck. We have one more, actually, Urza Saga. This is here because we have a deck that wants to combo with a Sensei's Divining top. There's a few other 1 mana costing baubles. We can just get a Soul Ring or a Vexing Bauble, whatever we need. But this is realistically here just to get a Sensei's Divining top. An expensive card is expensive. I don't really see me using this in any other deck when I take this apart, so I'm not sure if I will even bother holding onto this card later. But we have all these. Now, again, if we're copying search effects, Urza Saga is very good. It can get any land. So if we have the ability to copy this effect with our commander, what we can do is go get 2 more fetch lands. We can literally get these 2, for example, if we're copying that. And then we have more ways of copying. So we can turn 1 land into 2 lands, 2 lands into 4 lands. But all of these are basic fetchable lands because I'm doing my normal. If you're familiar with my channel, you know every time I do a Grixis style deck, rarely do I supplement non-basic lands in my deck that tap for color. Usually I will play this game where I have a huge assortment of fetch lands, and I will play with all of the basic lands I can. To me, that is a vanity thing, and it is a way of pointing out the flawed pricing point of lands in EDH. These basics are the exact same basics if you remember from my Gwendolyn de Courcy and Tetsuo and Croesus the Purger. These are the same Grixis basic lands, the Foil Odyssey beautiful ones I've been holding on to forever. I love Rob Alexander artwork. These are fantastic. These reflection ones are fantastic. These are the exact same basics I've had since I think Croesus was my first, no, Gwendolyn was my first Grixis deck, and they were not foil at that time in 2010. But then when the precons started coming out, I started foiling out my decks. And then by the time I got around to Grixis in 2011, 2012, I think these were all foil. We've been holding on to these for a very long time. But just to reiterate that point, you do not need to spend a significant amount of money on non-basic lands to have a functional deck. If you're just doing color, like if you're worried about color screw, there obviously isn't a command tower in this deck. That's very budget, but this deck doesn't need it. Now, we are an artifact deck. A lot of my deck is colorless, so we don't really have a lot of pips, colorful pips. I think the most stringent colored requirement is the Bolas's Citadel, and then we have a few double blue spells. But realistically, you just don't need to spend a significant amount of money on your lands unless you are doing CEDH. That's where you really want to start number crunching. The difference in your victory percentage, if you're doing like a mass basic land style deck versus someone playing alpha beta dual lands, that percent difference is not very significant. It's better to save your money. Let's go ahead and talk about the other primary combo of the deck, the Time Sieve. We do not need our commander for that combo either. But Time Sieve here requires us to sacrifice 5 artifacts. If we have 5 useless artifacts, we can sacrifice them to get an extra turn. Most notably, Thopter Assembly here. It pops into our hand during our upkeep if it's sustained a turn, and it gives us 5 little Thopter tokens. So if this is what we want to do, we want to have this to come out first, or at the end of an opponent's turn, we want to Whirve Invention this into play. So then our upkeep, we have the tokens to sacrifice. We then expose Time Sieve. We don't put this into play until we're ready to use it. We sacrifice those Thopters. We replay the assembly. We then have another turn to bounce the assembly, get the Thopters, and it repeats. It is a little bit expensive in mana to activate and cast a 6-drop, but you just want to make sure the timing is correct. You don't want to expose this. You want to make sure you get an upkeep for this. The newer addition to this, instead of the assembly, is this gigantic gnome. What happens here is he has a come into play effect where you can actually sacrifice other artifacts to make him bigger with his enter the battlefield trigger on the stack. Meaning you can use that, sacrifice some extra shit you have in play to make him bigger and make more gnome tokens, which means that you will have the tokens to sacrifice to Time Sieve. Now, you do have to actually make it to where he can attack to make more gnomes. Because you always want to be able to just create the extra tokens. If you cannot actually efficiently attack with this more than once, you're going to run out of tokens to make. But these two, one of them, either one of these and the Time Sieve, can enable us to take infinite turns. And again, that is probably the most awkward stage of this deck. Thematically, this fits. Sacrificing artifacts for value and copying the effect is exactly what the commander seems to represent to want to do. But if you are not sure if you can play this in your tier or bracket 3 group setting, you might want to nix this combo out of your deck. Now, again, as I said, this is probably, I'm going to be taking this apart shortly as I pursue my next Grixis deck. I've spent about 3 to 4 months playing Ashnod now, and I think I've seen and interacted with all of the fun little intricate ins and outs of this deck that I've been able to find. I've made tons of changes of this deck over the past few months, and I believe that this is the best I can make this deck how I would build it. There are better options, obviously. Like, you can change all sorts of these combos, the creatures, the lands, to be whatever you want. But I'm going to go further backwards in time. My love for my old decks, the old pre-2020 me, that I get that itch, you know, the nostalgia, the desire to recreate what you sold, something I used to have. One of the cards in my binder that I've been holding on to for a very long time is Cedrus. Cedrus is a very outdated commander. This is from Shards of Alar, this piece of paper. That's before the 2011 precon. Shards of Alar was 2008, I believe. I did a Cedrus deck a few times on my channel. I think some of the older videos got canned. There's still one up, which was a Turbo Reanimator deck, where we're all about trying to just land Jin Gitaxis on turn 2 or 3 or something stupid like that. But the nostalgia bug's tickling me. I have a slight desire to make all of my commander decks not have this hideous little dot right here, this foil dot. And so that means even before 2020. That's like 2016 or whatever when they started doing the hollow dots. I can't do that because I love Karazikar. I love my eyeball. And Bantu the Glorified is my current mono black deck, which I love that deck as well. But what I do want to do is maybe go further backwards in time with the majority of my decks and make them pre-2020, pre-ridiculous power creep. Obviously, that means my deck's going to be less powerful, because if I go, no matter what I do with Cedrus, like no matter what reanimation strategy I do with him, he's going to be worse than what this deck is capable of doing. So I'm making a strictly worse deck by going back in time. But God, that nostalgia bug is itching, doesn't it? Like, also, it's time. I think it's time for the king to come home. But yeah, this is my current Ashnod deck. If you have any opinions, ideas, funny artifact interactions, always share. Even though I plan on taking this deck apart, I do maintain deck lists. All of my videos will have their deck list down below, and if there's fun things, I will be adding and updating the deck list if I ever return to Ashnod. Who knows? In 2035, I might be rebuilding another Grixis deck and decide, man, I really need that Ashnod back. But I do hope you all have a wonderful Pride Month, and I'll catch you in the next video.